Hello again, everyone. That was such an insightful session. Thank you, Abdul. Um, we are on to our last session, last but not the least. And I'll dive in because we are short of time already. So this session is for breaking into product management for aspiring PMs. I'll go on to introduce the panelists for the session, and if you can just wave at the camera so that the audience can relate to you. Starting with Arthur. Arthur is the director of product and marketing at vFairs, which is a leading virtual events platform. And he's also the co-founder of product Soch, which is hosting this event. Glad to have you on board, Arthur. Next, we have Nikunj. Nikunj is the founder of PM School. He has worked in the product management space in the B2B platform, consumer products, gaming, and mental health. And now he's leading the PM School, which is a leading platform for product management in India. Along with that, we have Ankit. Ankit is also the co-founder of PM School. He has more than 8 years of experience, product management experience in food tech, insurance tech, and gaming. And he, along with Nikunj, built the PM School, which is again the inspiring product management platform, leading platform in India for aspiring product managers. And last but not the least, we have Mohimin. Mohimin is currently the product manager at Juknu, and he's also one of the founding members at Product Soch. Thank you everyone for joining. Glad to have you on board. I'll dive right into the questions. So maybe let's start with Nikunj. Talking about product management, how in India is the career of product managers like? What are, how do you see aspiring product managers? Is it part of the school curriculum, or is it something that people learn on their own?
Cool. Thank you for that question. Super relevant. I kind of get that question every day, especially people who join PM School. See, essentially, think of what product management was 5 years back and today, right? The role has also evolved in terms of responsibilities. At a very 50,000 feet, product management is fundamentally a person looking at discovery side of things and also looking at delivery with respect to product serving a certain consumer set of users. And eventually, it is obviously addressing the business impact, right? Now, from an aspirant point of view, I myself, Ankit, a lot of people in my network, we have learned product management on the job. In fact, I joined a very early stage startup back in the day, I think 8 years back. And generally in a startup, you tend to do a lot more. Your exposure to across different functions is like a standard ask, right? Think of a 10-15 member team. You might not just be a person in the sales team. You might also pick up certain sort of ops responsibilities, looking at how the website is being set up. And that's how you try to sort of build your own skills, right? Getting an understanding of the digital ecosystem. And that's how at least I personally transitioned to the product profile. Today, if you think of how people transition to product today, it's essentially there are like 3 trends I'm looking at with respect to either people joining in a company in a say role X, which is peripheral to product management. What I mean by that is think of an analyst, a product analyst, or think of a QA person or a developer, wherein they work in a product squad. And they have daily exposure with how product managers are driving the initiatives within the company. And within say 6 months, 1 year, they get enamored by the profile and try for an internal transition, like a lateral move, right? Getting into product. So you might join a company for which technology and the product is at the heart and soul of their business. And then after 1 or 2 years in your core profile, you transition into product. The second way is people would want to go for traditional, say cohort-based courses, referencing what people were discussing before this, right? Or in India, there are certain B schools where a lot of companies directly hire product managers from. So as a company or even as a college, right, they might not have a sort of strong curriculum, but for you as a sort of a recruiter, you might want to sort of hire people with a certain profile and skill set. And it's easier for you to go to a certain college and look at those skills with respect to the TG that you are addressing, right? That's generally the second way. The third is certain sort of prior experience that is relevant to the company that is hiring, For example, I might have worked in financial applications. I might be a banking person, right? I understand how banking as a domain works. So there's like a natural transition for me. I might not be good in technology. See, product management again is like a multifunction role, right? You should understand how the business works. You should be very close to the consumer side of things. And if you have those 2 or 3 buckets checked, the third skill, which might not be as good for your sort of personal profile, you can pick it up on the job, right? So people might tick 2 or 3 boxes and then transition into a role, and generally that happens in a startup, right? So at least these are 3 ways I see people getting into product. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Mohiman, I would want to take this forward with you from knowing that Pakistan's startup ecosystem is 5-10 years behind India. How do you see the product management role evolving in Pakistan?
So yeah, product management in Pakistan is evolving at a very decent pace. Although we don't have any formal education, which allows product managers to kind of get onto the bandwagon or try to kind of be at par with product managers abroad. But I myself am educated on the job. And as Nikunj mentioned, I was kind of someone who was basically in an application analyst role. And then I slowly transitioned to a PM role and did a couple of courses online to kind of upskill myself. And so in terms of Pakistan and how we're kind of moving forward, I think there needs to be a lot of uptake from our own side. And we need to kind of move forward in the way that we need to ensure that we have forums and we have educational facilities that are providing this sort of education to our PMs who are coming up. And schools like PM School or forums like Product Soch and the Product Tree are enabling product leaders of the future to kind of empower and be at the forefront of product management. So we are, like you said, slightly behind India, but we're slowly picking up the pace and we're trying to get there. And I would also add that if we are actually moving at this pace, we should also try to learn from those who are in the field and enterprises abroad. So basically having sessions with them, understanding their experiences, and obviously learning from them and implementing those policies.
Yeah, Ankit, I would want to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much for having us, right? Just adding to what Nikunj and Mohammadan said, right? In India, also, there is no formal training as such in the universities, but over the last couple of years, we have seen, people as young as first year in engineering or second year in engineering participating in case study challenges, right, which we do or which other communities do, right? And they're actually sending a very neatly drawn wireframes, and they actually know business metrics, and they actually know a go-to-market strategy, right? They're learning by themselves, right, from the free resources, so to say. But yes, there is a demand for formal education, but as such, I don't see it very prevalent in the university circuit in India, at least. And if I were to just talk about myself, back in 2011, I didn't know anything about what is a wireframe or what is, metrics. But it's so heartening to see people as young as, first year in engineering are actually sending us entries for our weekly challenges, which we do. And product case studies are a great way to at least get started, right? Like that gateway drug just to get started into product management.
I think I totally agree with that. So you mentioned that there are different aspects of being a product manager, right? You're talking about design, neat wireframes, and all of the things. Nikunj talked about how you need to be know the business as well as the consumer aspect, empathize with the consumer. So I think I would take up with Arthur maybe on this. What do you think are the essential skill sets for a product manager to get into this domain?
Thank you very much for that. So I think I'd like to maybe bifurcate that into hard skills and soft skills. And, I guess soft skills are a bit harder to attain. Naturally, it takes a much more experiential learning to really get there. But from a hard skill perspective, like what I've seen is that product managers who are entering the field, they'll definitely need to know what the product management lifecycle is. There are certain aspects and rituals that they'll have to get attuned to. For example, how do you write a user story, what a PRD is, how to actually pick up skills in wireframing and design. And then, like what road mapping is, what prioritization frameworks mean, what data analytics mean. So I think those are hard skills. Unfortunately, I don't think that anybody can come prepared completely for learning everything and then entering a particular job. Some of that will always be on the job training, simply because the domain is very specific. It has its own niceties. But at the same time, what I feel that people really struggle in is understanding what the product management role sort of encompasses. And the challenge that the product manager role is not well defined. It's every company has its own way of defining it. And you can be as simple as someone who's responsible for delivery, or you could be someone who's actually taking the entire full stack, responsible for full product marketing, taking it to market, talking to customers, etc. And based on that, the skill set in terms of soft skills also changes. So at the core, it is a lot about empathy. It's about critical problem solving. You need to understand what the context of a particular problem is. Be very, very comprehensive about various edge cases and the dimensions of the problem, but then take it one step further by building empathy, having a high emotional quotient. Like, I think the fact that most product managers struggle in self-projection, for example, they have their own perception about how a problem needs to be solved, as opposed to taking the customer standpoint, seeing that problem from their shoes. That's a challenge of its own, and it's not easily taught. It's not something that comes naturally at times. Even I struggled with this early on in my career. And in Pakistan specifically, what I think is that this particular, a lot of the people who have moved into product management have come from the engineering mindset. When you talk about engineering, they're very solution driven, right? So you give them a problem, they want to solve it. The research aspect is the most thinnest and the weakest part that I see. That there's no inquisition that's actually triggered as soon as a problem comes your way. You're actually thinking about, okay, how do I solve it, as opposed to conducting some diligence, conducting that customer research, which will then give you that platform to resolve it. A lot of the times we just move into the solution space prematurely, whereas the problem space and the framing of the problem is where the massive issue lies. So so in terms of skill set, it's both hard skills and soft skills, just to sum up my answer. But hard skills are some things that you can learn with online training and online courses, definitely. Some of that will always remain on the job. There is no such thing as, oh, I come completely prepared for a job and I won't have anything to learn. There's always domain specific things. Having said that, soft skills are the things that that you'll need a lot more training and possibly much more hand-holding and mentorship on to really scale and do well on.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive answer. I think I would, as we're discussing that you need some background, so and online trainings, we have PM School and platforms like these. From the educational background perspective, so these are some things that you're saying that people learn. We don't have any education or any trainings within the university or any curriculum within the university for product management. So what do you think, what kind of educational background is required or is a good start point for aspiring PMs to opt for example, in their undergraduate or moving forward? Is it more business focused, tech focused, or what's the sweet spot that they can find for venturing into product management? Maybe we can start with you, Ankit.
Great question, right? I am a firm believer that anyone can be a great product manager, right? We have seen in the past 1.5 year running PM School, we have seen people not from engineering backgrounds transitioning into a PM very smoothly, right? They are able to upskill themselves in certain skills, right? Let's say if you're a computer science engineer, obviously you might be at an advantage because you know how technology works or how internet works, right? But then you're also biased because, as Athir said, you are very solution driven, right? But then any people from any background can become a good product manager as long as you have a very strong first principle thinking. You are curious, you are delivery oriented, you know how to get things done, right? You know how to measure and iterate upon it. All of the hard skills you can learn. These are not skills which you cannot learn, right? It might be that, let's say, someone who comes from a B school might have business as his or her strong point, but then he might not have other skill set. Let's say he might not have a UX skill, but then he or she can upskill himself in UX, right? You need to know enough of enough skill set of other stakeholders that you are able to critique or have a solid conversation with them, or you're able to drive home a particular point, right? You are able to talk to your CEO or your seniors that, hey, I want to, probably launch this feature or probably do this solution. So you're able to reason enough with them And for that, you don't need to be an expert in everything. You just need to learn enough so that you can empathize with what they are saying, right? So we have seen people from QA background becoming PMs, right? I'm a firm believer QAs make very good PMs, right? We have seen people from UX background becoming great PMs, right? We have seen people from engineering background become great PMs, from business background. I have like a few friends who did a BCom as their undergraduate, and now they're product managers, right? So again, we are not at least in India, we're not at a stage wherein it's like the US, where psychology majors are also like a lot of psychology majors also becoming PM, but that trend has now started, right? That people from various backgrounds are becoming PM. It's good for the community itself because they bring their aspect to the table. Maybe as an engineer, I might miss what a PM who came from a UX wants to say, right? But then the more the merrier, right? You bring certain aspect to the table, you bring your strength to play to your strength and try to upskill in other things which you lack, right? And upskill enough so that you can have a good conversation with the stakeholders.
And that's a very interesting perspective. Nikunj, would you want to take this forward?
So I'll talk it from a hiring manager's perspective, right? When I'm taking an interview, what are the 2 or 3 things I generally look at is, it's fine if you don't come from a comp science background, as long as you have had exposure to understanding what a product life cycle is. That does not mean do you understand those agile concepts or PRD. As you could have been a project manager from a non-comp science background, or you could have been a marketing person. You understand top of the funnel, how acquisition works, right? Do you understand how a certain piece of code is shipped? You might not have coded ever in your life, that's fine. So if you understand the product life cycle, you understand the journey of how delivery happens. And secondly, in the interviews, I will also look for your problem solving aptitude. As Atir, I think, rightly put it, right? People a lot of times don't frame the problem, they won't scope it. And I would find it super difficult just by judging a background or a degree, right? I would not know whether the person is good in X or Y. In fact, in India, I've seen wherever we have sort of hired folks, so the first step is generally a take-home assignment, right? And even in interviews, we tend to give them the candidates a very broad global statement, right? Hey, how do you solve for X? So it's not much about the final end solution, but the basis or the background of how do they arrive at the solution, right? What is their research? Did they spend enough time in trying to sort of narrow down the 50,000 feet statement to a 10,000 feet level, right? Do you scope it in terms of, okay, is it the right problem to solve? Have we validated it? Is it the right time? Who are we solving it for, right? And how big is the problem? You're essentially clarifying this. In a real-time interview process, it's more about making it a two-sided communication in a sort of asynchronous assignment. It's more about how the person sort of reaches the final end solution, the features you're suggesting, right? So from a background, just to put it bottom line conclusion is, I would only look for exposure to product life cycle from filtering from the resumes, and then it'll be basis how they do in the interviews, right? That's more on problem solving, especially the first PMs, APMs or PM1 roles.
Perfect. I think I would want to take it forward with you, Mohimin. From in the Pakistan's perspective, we know that we don't have for now yet like platforms like PM School where you can get certifications or courses or learn about PM skill sets. So we have a question in chat as well that do you think fresh graduates can join as PMs, and what kind of education background would you look at in this context?
Okay, so I myself am not from a tech background. I did my bachelor's in business economics, and I slowly transitioned into a PM role. Now, over the years, what I've kind of done is I've listed out traits of a good PM, and they've come up to at least 7. The first one is he has to be empathetic towards the end user. Right. So if he doesn't have empathy towards the person he's solving the problem for, then I don't think he'll be able to understand the problem and then even go on to solve it. Secondly, he needs to be a good negotiator because he's going to be consistently bugged, or I guess, if you want to say it, harassed by the development team, the stakeholders, and I guess other users to kind of get a certain feature into their product. So he needs to negotiate. Thirdly, he needs to be a good elicitor, right? He needs to be able to draw the information out of that user, right? And he needs to be able to understand the pain points and then kind of come up with the storyboard, the wireframes, and so on and so forth to kind of deliver it. He needs to be a great collaborator, and he needs to be a collaborative leader, right? Because a PM is just, I guess, the starting point from the problem, but the developers, the QA, DevOps, they all contribute towards getting the product out. So he needs to be able to collaborate, but also put his foot down when it's necessary. Then if you look at it from like organizational or even a strategy point of view, he needs to think strategically. He needs to know the product vision. He needs to be able to lay out the product roadmap. And my personal view is PMs are mini CEOs, right? So you can have a mini CEO for multiple products, or he could be one single mini CEO for all the products that you have a suite of, right? So that's that. And then the other two are, he needs to be passionate about products. So if he doesn't enjoy using tech or enjoy using different apps, then I don't think that's the right job that he should be taking on. And lastly, he needs to have a sense of design and user experience. Now, I say that from a Pakistani point of view, because when you're in a startup, you might not be able to afford a great user experience designer or user research team, or a team that can understand the user's point of view. So he needs to have some sort of, I guess, knowledge, or at least insights into how to design a great user experience from start to finish, and be able to kind of communicate that to the development team so they can produce it and ship it out. So those are the 7 things that I would see, or traits of a good PM. And I think if you are looking to be a PM, you need to embody these, or at least slowly be able to build up and skill up yourself so that you can execute the job properly.
Okay. Thank you for pointing out those 7 important traits. I think I'll take it forward with Atar. What do you think is the necessity for having, because nowadays we see there are a lot of online courses or certifications for that matter in in product management, because it's not taught in university, so people go for those certifications. What do you think is the need for that, and how important are the certifications for venturing into, for aspiring PMs, or can they even make their way through without the certifications?
I think we live in an era where certifications have become important. Like my personal opinion on this has changed over time. Like I started about 11 years ago. At that time, there was no concept of product school or PM school at that time. And it was primarily on the job learning. And, like I look at my years and I said, I got by, then why can't everybody else? But the fact of the matter is that the bar in terms of quality has changed. And now, there's such a fast-paced aspect to product management that you really do need to learn the basics and principles pretty quickly. But I would make a very important differentiation here. While the basic principles need to be inculcated as soon as possible, and something like a PM school 8-week course can do that, I agree. PM school or Reforge, product school and Reforge are also sharing their certifications. I think that's great. However, that is not a substitute for experiential learning. That's not a substitute to actually other deeper domain-specific learning avenues as well, because you can come out of that, but when you basically take that product management role at a Swiggy or a Zomato or at a Blink or a repair desk, at that time you'll realize that you have some of the principles which will at least get you through the rituals that you have to do from a roadmap to a prioritization, but you will still have to dig deeper and adjust your model for the needs of that particular product, right? So I've been a part of like 5 or 6 different products, whether that's Talentera, vFairs, Bait.com, Parkwheels. All of them have had different dynamics altogether, and the learning that I had has never been cleanly applied on or uniformly applied in each one of those cases. I had to adjust my model very, very quickly. So I think the certification is supposed to be used as a knowledge base that I'm going to grow on. I think it's extremely important in this era, definitely, to acquire one. However, learning shouldn't stop with a certification. It should just be the baseline. And then you also need to have the flexibility to adjust yourself based on what the product needs are. And that's what I think, like when I get a question about this, like, hey, Atar, should I do this certification, etc. The challenge is that a lot of people are asking that from a job perspective. Will this earn me a job? And that's a good question, but then you have to then realize, sort of pose the question appropriately. Are you doing this to secure a job, or are you doing this for your product management knowledge? And both answers are slightly different. When you're saying it's for a job, for the Indian market, I can't say as such, and I think Nikunj and Ankit can weigh in on that. But in Pakistan, the product management economy is still growing. There are not many hiring managers that actually know about a product school syllabus or a PM school syllabus. So even if you have done that certification, will that really motivate them to hire you? It's still debatable. It really depends on the education level of that hiring manager, how educated they are about that particular certification. So if you're doing it for a job, my request is that go onto their job descriptions, check out their past employees. Have they done those certifications? If not, then apparently it's not really going to move the needle when it comes to acquiring a job. On the other hand, if you're talking about knowledge, this, I want to grade product management, or I really want to learn the discipline, absolutely, certifications can help in that. I would definitely ask you to learn what the syllabus is, really know what they're probably going to be sharing. And it always needs to be a balance. It should be a balance between theoretical learning, which is great, which always has principles, but also experiential learning or knowledge from industry experts who can at least give that theoretical knowledge some context, some practical aspect, or because otherwise, theory and practicality, they sometimes have a little gap, and that needs to be filled with some certain context. So and to sum up, I think certifications in this era are important, but they are not, they are necessary, but they're not sufficient.
Thank you so much. I think you pointed out a very good point that it really depends. If you're doing it for a job, then is it even recognized? So I think I would want to take up with Nikunj maybe in India, because I know PM School offers certifications. So how's the acceptance of those certifications like? Are they even, when Ankit Arthur says that, are they acceptable? Do people really do those certifications for job, or do they do it for their personal grooming?
So the way we run PM School, obviously I won't go deep into that, but in terms of our relationship with companies, right? Today, the program is not run in a silo. In fact, we work very closely with certain hiring managers, right? That really helps. Think of product management again. It's different depending on the industry you are in. Product management in an e-commerce company is very different from product management in a B2B setup, right? The challenges are very different. The stage of the company also, if it's an early stage startup, it's about looking at, can you get adoption? Can you reach product market fit as soon as possible? For an evolved company, it's about cracking the next layer of distribution, new geographies or new verticals, right? So every company has a very different sort of need. At least to answer from a PM School's perspective, and a lot of communities which have come up in India, it's essentially your first step, understanding what product management is, and then getting into your first role, right? If you think of product management, it's like a vast sort of discovery for you to even today. I'm now getting deeper into retention products and obviously consumer tech side of things, where you can slice products into different categories, right? Because every product is different. You cannot just silo. A lot of job descriptions out there have the title product manager, but if you look at the job description, the responsibilities might change. There could be that 30-40% sort of overlap which is consistent across these roles, but a larger 60-70% responsibilities might change, right? So what these certifications essentially do, as Arthur said, right, that's your first step to getting into what product management is, and it exposes you to sort of have certain mentors and people who are already product managers. You build those relationships, and then when you are trying to sort of get deeper into product management, you need to sort of crack your first internship or crack your first role, because you would evolve in terms of how you perceive product management. I would rather say my first 3 years as a PM, even though my title was product management, I was more like a project manager, right? I was more responsible for the delivery side of things. And as you grow and you sort of get exposure to different types of how product is perceived in terms of a product org in a certain culture, you will also understand, you're also responsible for a discovery side of things, right? So you will, in fact, any aspirant out here, they will obviously try to get into product via internships or maybe going through 1 or 2 certifications. It'll take 1 or 2 years. It's a long evolving process. That's why when we speak to aspirants, the first question we ask is, where do you struggle with? Are you not able to get your profile shortlisted? Or are you getting a lot of calls for interviews, but you're not being able to crack an interview? What is your challenge? Basis that the expectations mismatch should not happen. That's where candidates should really figure out their end goals here.
I think we're running out of time. Just one last question. I'll open it up to the panel. We have talked a lot about for breaking into the product management, like for aspiring PMs. I would want to get your perspective on for PMs who want to like evolve in the role. So as you go into the senior roles of product management, how do you stay connected to the consumer? And what are some of the traits that you need to polish as you go up at the ladder?
So I guess
would you want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll take a lead on that. So, and I'll probably address the latter part of the question. How do we stay in touch with the users? Previously, when I was working with a SaaS-based company, we used to communicate with our users via, I guess, blogs, social media, asking them for recommendations, writing newsletters regarding topics that were of interest to them, probably sending them birthday reminders and offering them sneak peeks into what our product roadmap looked like. Now, this obviously gave us a lot of insights into what the customers or the users were thinking. But now that I'm in a B2B startup, and we are obviously the user base that we're targeting is a group of people who have recently been provided an app, and they are not on the same educational level as an average Pakistani would be, right? So even if we write a newsletter, I don't think they'll be able to read it. If we probably ask them for a recommendation, I don't think they'll be able to write one. So what we need to do is we've opted for the other approach. We go down the line of doing A/B testing. We do user focus groups. And my personal favorite is actually we go into the field as product managers and sit with our primary users and ask them what our app is doing for them, what they want us to do for them, and how we can improve the app and the ecosystem as a whole. And I think this is the most fruitful part, listening to the user's experience from their mouth and kind of understanding how he or she feels about our apps and kind of seeing them explain the problems that they're having. So if you are someone who is looking to kind of connect with your end user, so if you could opt for any of these channels or options.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe add on to that, and my perspective, like being a product leader and growing in the ranks, like there is no substitute of talking to a customer. Even when you're a product manager, a product owner, or a product director of product management, you still have to chat with your customers and just really understand what their needs are. I think as you're scaling up in your product role, what I've realized in my little career is that you need to expand on the angles that you analyze a particular customer on. So one is, of course, directly talking to them, but you also need to understand that as you're building up the relationship, there will be emotional bias will always creep in, and they will project certain statements or their feelings and their emotions and sentiments in a certain way. But then you also have to sort of corroborate that information getting directly from the customer from different other angles, whether that's from product analytics, whether that's from customer support tickets, whether that's from your sales team. And then also try to fuel that into your decision-making process. Because sometimes what happens is the customer is saying, "Bahut maza aa raha hai, your app is great, I love it." But then when you look at the analytics, there's no usage, there's no traction. And you're like, is that even what's happening here? And then sometimes you're looking at analytics and things are failing, but the customer is either frustrated or either very, very happy. A typical example of this was, like I was doing park wheels, and there was this search feature that we had. Now, at that time we had drunk the Kool-Aid of page views. More page views is equal to greater traction, right? And then we had basically released a new search aspect, and we thought that this will be great. It was different facets that we had launched, and what we had seen was page views were increasing. And we were very happy because we got 50 to 20% increase in our page views and sessions, and advertising was definitely rising in terms of revenue. But when we talked to our customers, we found out they're actually struggling because they can't find what they want to find, and they have to actually keep on adding filters to get to their particular object of desire. So the experience was frustrating, even though the business aspect of things was becoming better. Now that's where you need to expand the angles that you analyze a product, analyze your customers. So even when it comes to a question about interacting with your customers or learning more about them, talking to them directly is one aspect, but then also trying to look at other data points to see or contextualize what their opinions are.
Perfect. I think you couldn't be more right. The data is the center of everything. So with this, we're hitting the end of the session. We're out of time. It was a great session. There's still so many questions in the comments in the chat. I have a lot of questions to follow up. And I think this is, since it's not very mainstream, it's not taught in universities and all, a lot of people have questions about venturing into product management. But I think PM School, Product Soch, Product Tree are great platforms to learn for all of these. Thank you again so much for all four of you for taking our time to join us today. It was lovely having you.
Thank you, Nikunj.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Atif. Thanks,
you.
Mohammed. Thanks, Abdul. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Shravan.
Cool, man.